Good morning. Welcome to the 38th annual meeting of Doctors for Disaster Preparedness. We thank the Governor of Nevada for permitting us to meet here, although it's very difficult. I think we could solve our audiovisual problems by opening that air wall, but that's verboten. So we hope that we will be able to get the slides visible next door momentarily. In the meantime, these are printed out in your packets. I'd like to begin by acknowledging people who can no longer be with us. Dr. Richard Keene, who spoke at our 2010 meeting in Orlando. Dr. Fred Singer, one of the stalwarts of defending science and one of the greatest American scientists, the founder of the NIPCC, the non-governmental panel on climate change, who had been with us practically at every single meeting until the past couple years. Dr. Alan Brodsky, who was one of the last living scientists who knew about nuclear weapons effects from firsthand experience. If you don't have his book, Handbook for Survival, you should try to get one. And John Utley, who has been with us at many, many meetings and frequently wrote about civil defense. So could we have a moment of silence to remember our departed friends? To remind you of the mission of Doctors for Disaster Preparedness is to promote preparedness to save lives in the event of natural disaster, terrorism, or war. And it looks to me as though we're having all three at once right now, and certainly there's plenty of terror to go around. And a reminder from the late Crescent Carney, who was at many of our meetings while he was still with us, there are enemies. They're enemies, they want to destroy us, and I don't think we can appease them. I got interested in this because of a talk by Helen Caldicott, the Australian pediatrician at the University of Arizona College of Medicine, who was totally against all things nuclear, couldn't tell the difference between a power plant and a bomb. And she'd like to ask this popular thing, is a megaton, an ounce of prevention is worth a megaton of cure? But I think what we're having now is a megaton or even a gigaton of supposed prevention. And is that worth 200 milligrams of cure, say, like hydroxychloroquine? They talked about we have to have prevention. Prevention is the only thing, except they were totally against preparedness. Well, all we had to do was get rid of every nuclear weapon on Earth, at least every nuclear weapon that the United States had, and everything would be fine. But if we knew what to do in the event of one of these things went off to prevent as many casualties as possible, well, then we were provoking war. And then we had the linear no threshold theory. There is no safe dose of radiation. And there's probably no safe dose of coronavirus. And I'll tell you, there's some of it in the state of Nevada, and probably some of it in this room, and your mask is not going to help you very much, or at all. It's invisible. It's odorless. It's tasteless. It's so scary. And, of course, what do you call something like that? Well, I'm quote here Xi Jinping, but he is not a doctor from Africa who said something who might believe in demons somewhere. This is the guy, the head of the Chinese Communist Party and the president of Japan. The new coronavirus is a devil. And China is confident of winning the battle against it. And the epidemic is a demon. And we cannot let this demon hide. Here's a scene. It may look familiar to you from a Walmart or the airport, if you've been there recently, or all kinds of things with the one-way traffic and the distancing and the masks. This comes from a high school in Wuhan. So do you think that everybody in the world thought up the 6 feet and the masks spontaneously, all by themselves and all at the same time? Well, I wonder about that. CO2, of course, is one of the demons that we talk about at this meeting quite a lot, along with radiation and now the coronavirus. And there are OSHA standards about this. You're not supposed to be allowed on during an 8-hour shift to be exposed to more than 5,000 parts per million. That may be exceeded on a submarine, perhaps. But probably everybody in this hotel is wearing a mask in violation of OSHA standards. I do have a CO2 monitor you can stick up under your mask if you want to know how much it's retaining. So far I found a Samgo 1 mask and the Hanes cloth mask that does not retain too much CO2, but all the others, including the surgical masks, the KN95 masks, soon reach a level of greater than 10,000 parts per million. You know, if it's in the atmosphere, 400 parts per million is a disaster. But so if you want to contribute to my data set, I'll be glad to measure what's under your mask. At 10,000 parts per million, some people get drowsy, so I would suggest please don't wear this thing when you're driving. Cars have crashed, and there have been 14-year-old boys in China who have dropped dead when they're running outside with a mask, which, you know, is absurd to begin with, but they did drop dead during their physical fitness exercises. Here's a man that we may remember, Karl Brandt. He was the first defendant at the Nazi doctor's trial. Even on the gallows, he was the first to be executed. He said everything he did was completely moral and ethical. He was only serving the fatherland. He was probably responsible for the euthanasia program of disabled people, and at least he knew a lot about it. It had something to do with the atrocious medical experiments on concentration camp victims. Well, the Nazi medical ethic was that the state comes first, the state comes ahead of the individual. In this book, Karl Brandt, The Nazi Doctor, it's mainly interesting because what it tells about how the state worked in the Third Reich, that it was an administrative state where a lot of decisions were being made by local functionaries, and while the Führer had to sort of in general approve of them, Hitler did not know everything that was going on, and there was a great emphasis on plausible deniability up and down the chain of command. Well, unfortunately, we have an administrative state here, and there are some extremely influential people who are making decisions that affect your life every day. Here's one of them at the Washington Nationals versus New York Yankees baseball game in July. Dr. Fauci, who's been in charge of our preparedness or non-preparedness for decades. You have to have masks, social distancing, and no ball games for you. You have to be very, very afraid until we have a treatment or a vaccine. And here's the man who's going to bring us a vaccine, whose main skill is making money and influencing the world. That's a UN flag in the background, Bill Gates. Who says we need a miracle treatment that's at least 95% effective. Well, the FDA will be content if maybe we can get a vaccine that's 50% effective. Humankind has never had a more urgent task than creating broad immunity for coronavirus. Realistically, if we're going to return to normal, we need to develop a safe, effective vaccine. We need to make billions of doses. We need to get them out to every part of the world. And the U.S. government, before anything has been approved, has already bought 100 million doses with plans to maybe buy 500 million more. And it's a very unique vaccine. And it's an RNA vaccine. Instead of injecting a pathogen antigen into your body, we instead give the body the genetic code needed to produce the antigen. You essentially turn your body into its own vaccine manufacturing unit. Some people are concerned about eating GMO foods, which I don't care about, but I do have some concerns about turning myself into a genetically modified organism. And that's his wording about what this vaccine is supposed to do. You inject foreign genetic material into your cells. It gets incorporated into your cells and causes them to make a foreign protein, the viral spike protein, and then that will stimulate your immune system to make antibodies against that. One thing to remember about your genome is that most of it is dedicated to off switches, to telling things where to stop, and not entirely clear how you're going to stop this. Here is some data from one of the vaccines. I think it's a Pfizer vaccine that's now being tested for effectiveness. This is the safety data. You will see this is for the second dose. You're going to have to at least have 2 doses. The systemic effect, virtually 100% of people who got the intermediate dose had headaches. So virtually everybody had some sort of sickness as a result. And over on the right-hand side, you see the number who took some sort of Tylenol or ibuprofen because they felt sick. That was virtually everybody. This is a reactogenic vaccine, so instead of using a saline placebo, and some of the trials are using meningococcal vaccine, which is also a very reactogenic vaccine, so they can say, well, the coronavirus vaccine is no worse than meningococcal vaccine. This is a diagram from a book on immunology. I don't expect you to know anything except there are a lot of arrows going back and forth and a lot of little circles. These are feedback loops. These are signals to different cells in the body, including the professional killers. That's what they're called. Those are the T cells that actually kill bacteria or kill cells that maybe have viral protein in them. And there are ways of marking cells to be killed so that they don't kill the wrong ones. After hearing a lot of lectures on immunology by the expert who said, this is very complicated, and I say, yeah, everybody agrees with that. It reminded me of this gentleman here. It's Thomas Wright. He is an American, or was an American jazz musician who went by the name Fats Waller. And one day, a woman asked him, what is syncopation? And he had this classic reply, lady, if you don't know what it is, you ain't got no business messing with it. So I think maybe this ought to apply to some of the things our scientists are doing. And here's something from one of my favorite poems, Der Zauberlehrer. Here we see a scientist who's consulting some peer-reviewed literature and carrying on experiments. But you are probably more familiar with Disney's versions of the Sorcerer's Apprentice. When the master was away, the apprentice, who was very lazy, got tired of fetching water, so he decided to cast a spell and get the broomsticks to fetch water for him, which it obediently did, except it just kept bringing more and more water, and the place was flooding. He had this brilliant idea, well, I'll just whack the thing in half with my axe, which he did, and then he had two broomsticks who were bringing water. And this is how it finally ended there. The poem by Goethe in 1797, the last line I really like. Die rief die Geister werde ich nun nicht los. I conjured up all these spirits and I can't get rid of them. And so the Lord and Master came and put an end to that. Fortunately, he had somebody to stop him. Well, there are a lot of things going on here with this virus that I'll have to talk about later in the program since one of our speakers couldn't make it. But I think the thing that we need to remember at this time is to be not afraid. All of the demons come to say, be very, very afraid. And if somebody's coming with an angel on your side, this is how they usually start. Be not afraid. Our work is cut out for us. We need to fight this like we've never fought anything before. And on the last slide there, I have some references that I've been very preoccupied, just deluged with a lot of information and trying to write some things to help people understand what is going on and what they can profitably do about it. So thank you for coming. I hope that you will keep in touch with us and take this message home and let us know what you all are doing, what we can do better. Thank you so much.